People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, the comedy panel show that's just like the news, in that the left fights the right and it doesn't really seem to matter who wins. We cover the big stories. It was in fact a troop of baboons and not angry vegans.
I like that.
And the really important stories.
Fat naked cow gets stuck in swimming pool.
It's a headline in a lot of local newspapers. Yeah.
We're on the same team, Nick. Yeah, but I'm just helping you.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, Saturday nights, 8 o'clock on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Good afternoon and welcome. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. I'm Nana Akua, and for the next 2 hours, me and my panel will be taking on some of the big topics that are hitting the headlines right now. This show is all about opinion. It's mine, it's theirs, and of course it's yours. We'll be debating, discussing, and at times we'll disagree, but no one will be cancelled. So joining me today, it's former Conservative advisor Claire Pearsall. Let's quickly go over to Boris Johnson now that he's doing a quick speech.
Some of the worst horrors of the 20th century in recent memory, and now finds itself with a thriving social and economic life and near universal primary education. Today, Rwanda is hosting leaders representing 2/3 of the world's population, stretching from the remotest islands of the Pacific to the southern tip of Africa. Rwanda was never a British colony. It joined the Commonwealth of its own volition in 2009, recognising the benefits that come from being part of a progressive alliance representing, as I say, 2/3 of the world's population and some of its fastest growing economies. As many British Prime Ministers before me, and of course both Her Majesty the Queen and the Prince of Wales, have recognised, there are few forums more quietly important for our nation's peace, prosperity and global influence. We benefit from the incredible Commonwealth advantage, the fertiliser I talked about yesterday, of shared language and institutions, which opens doors and cuts the cost of doing business. We want to seize those opportunities, and that's why I announced this week major new British investments in green infrastructure projects, as well as trade schemes designed to break down the barriers to doing business. This is where the UK is positioning ourselves post-Brexit, in close alliance with our European neighbours, but also deepening our ties with old friends in Asia, Africa, the Caribbean and the Pacific. More trade, more commerce brings prosperity and stability to other countries, but it also cuts costs for British consumers and opens opportunities for UK business, so jobs and growth at home as well. Unfortunately, that global prosperity and stability is being threatened by Vladimir Putin's unprovoked assault on Ukraine. Many of the countries represented here in Kigali today find themselves bearing the brunt of Putin's folly. Their populations brought closer to poverty by spiralling food and energy costs. I know, of course, and deeply appreciate, understand that families, businesses in the UK have been hit hard as well by the rising costs of living. And that's why in our country, our Chancellor has introduced an unprecedented package of financial support for the most vulnerable households. But we should also recognise the challenges around the world. the UN estimates that an additional 48 million people will be pushed into acute hunger this year. That is to the point of starvation caused by climate change and post-pandemic supply shortages, but also by the war in Ukraine. I spoke to President Zelensky last week in Kiev about how we can unblock Russia's blockade of Ukraine grain exports. But today we're announcing a new £372 million package of UK aid, and that funding will support the UN's emergency response in the hardest hit countries, as well as providing cutting-edge science partnerships to look at drought-resistant crops and new agricultural techniques. And as I go tomorrow night to the G7 in Germany, we will also be looking at what more the richer countries can do to bring down global commodity prices and increase food supplies to get the world economy back on track and stick up at the same time for the freedoms in which we all believe. Thank you very much. I'm going to go, I've got quite a few questions here from Alex. Let's go first to Alex Forsyth of the BBC.
Thank you, Prime Minister. You've been talking about the work that you are doing on the global stage, but isn't it the reality that some voters don't like the work that you're doing at home? You've lost what was a solid Conservative seat, you've lost a seat you won less than 3 years ago, and you've lost your party chairman. Have you considered, Prime Minister, that perhaps you are part of the problem?
I think that, of course, people are going to want to look at, political impacts and the impacts on party politics of these by-elections. But I just remind you of the context in which we're operating. The world, as I've just said, the UK, other parts of the world are facing the price shocks caused by not just supply chain problems we've seen post-COVID, but also by the war in Ukraine. We're dealing with those with a huge amount of fiscal firepower, so £1,200 for the 8 million most vulnerable households coming into people's bank accounts next month, tax cuts for the vast majority of people paying national insurance contributions, and also, of course, focusing on the ways we can, as I said, bear down on people's costs more generally. So, look, I'm not going to pretend these are brilliant results. We've got to listen, we've got to learn. But it wasn't that long ago, only just over a year ago, that we won a spectacular by-election victory. When people are finding it tough, they send messages to politicians, and politicians have got to respond, and that's what we're doing. I think the fundamentals in the UK economy are good, but we've got to recognise that times are tough for people right now. But I think we have the right programme, the right plan for a stronger economy to get our country through it and come out stronger the other side. Dan Hewitt of ITV.
Thank you, Prime Minister. You're defiant in defeat today, but your opponents say you're delusional, that you're now putting your own interests ahead of the party and the country. Your biggest asset was that you're a winner. Now that you've started losing, what is Boris Johnson's big asset?
Look, I think that what people want is a government that focuses 100% on their concerns and not on political consequences in Westminster. And I've absolutely no doubt that this is a government that has not only achieved remarkable things, done some very great things, is going to continue to do some great things for the people of this country. And we're going through a tough time right now. We have inflationary pressures that I've talked about. I understand people's feelings, but we're going to get through them. And I just remind you, we've got people in payrolled employment, 620,000 more than before the pandemic began. What we've got to do is make sure that we continue with the work that we're doing to help people in the short term with the pressures they're facing, but also deal with the issues in our supply chains, issues in our transport system, in our housing market, in our energy market. Reform those things so as to bear down on costs and make things easier for people and make our economy more productive. It's a massive agenda for change, and we're going to get on with it. Kate Ferguson of The Sun.
Thanks, Prime Minister. 2 quick questions, if I may. It's been a tough day for you today. Was there any point you'd considered resigning? And the main question, if possible, obviously the unions are going on strike in the airports now. Do you think they're wrecking people's summer holidays? Are you considering bringing the military in to help staff airports now? And also, do you think Brits should staycate if they can't go away this summer because of the union strikes? Thanks.
Thanks very much, Kate. Look, with the airlines, like the railways, got very substantial sums of public money in support during the pandemic. I think it was 8 billion for the airlines, 16 billion for the railways from memory. I don't think there are justifications for these strikes, but what I want is for people to get round the table and sort it out. When you look at what's happening on the railways, as I've said repeatedly, I think there's an overwhelming case for change and reform and improvement. This is a government that is putting huge sums into our railways. Huge sums of taxpayers' money are going into the railways. 96 billion just into the integrated rail plan for railways in the north and the Midlands. I think taxpayers and fare payers have a right to demand improvements in the way those railways operate for that investment, and that's what we're going to get. Martin Brown of The Express.
Thank you, Prime Minister. You had a much anticipated meeting with Prince Charles today. Did you manage to speak to him about your Rwanda asylum policy, and could you just describe how your relationship is with the heir to the throne?
Yeah, well, look, I mean, obviously, I'm not going to go into what happened with the conversation that took place. You know it did take place. I don't discuss conversations either with Her Majesty the Queen or with the heir to the throne. You wouldn't expect that, but it was a good old chinwag, and we certainly covered a lot of ground. And there's no doubt that when you look at what you can certainly take away from what the Prince had to say today in his opening address to the summit is that everyone can see the huge progress that Rwanda has made. Claire Ellicott of the Mail.
Thank you, Prime Minister. The Cabinet's been rather quiet today in tweeting their support for you. Are you confident that you still have their backing? And also, are you disappointed about the Baroness Scotland re-election?
Thanks, Claire. So, look, I mean, first of all, the government, I'm here in Rwanda, getting on with the CHOGM summit, which is incredibly important for our country and for our world. I hope that in London, I know that in London, ministers of all descriptions, cabinet or otherwise, are getting on with the job of sorting out the cost of living pressures that people face and delivering on our agenda for change and reform and improvement. And that's what I would hope that they are doing. On the Secretary General of the Commonwealth, look, I think it's a good day for democracy. What is the Commonwealth? It is an amazing group of 54 countries that share values, and in particular the idea of democracy. And I work well with Baroness Scotland, have done for a very long time since I became Foreign Secretary, I think, and look forward to working well with her in the next couple of years. Now, this is a crucial time for the Commonwealth. I think people are looking more and more to this institution. More and more countries want to join it. They see the value of it. And so we'll be doing everything we can simultaneously to help strengthen the Commonwealth Secretariat and really deliver value for Commonwealth members. Camilla Turner, Telegraph.
Thank you, Prime Minister. You're now out of the country until next Thursday. Are you worried MPs from your own party are going to be plotting to get rid of you while you're away? And secondly, you've just lost what was a really safe Tory seat. How are you going to stop blue wall voters across the country voting Lib Dem in the next general election?
Thanks. So I think the answer to the first question is no. But the answer on the second question is what you have in this government is a reforming government that has taken all sorts of very difficult and tough decisions. And if you look at what we did during COVID, it wasn't easy, but we got some big decisions right. We had the first vaccine first approved vaccine, I think, of any country in the world. We had the fastest vaccine rollout in Europe. We came out of COVID faster than anybody else. As I've told you, we now have very low unemployment by historic standards. We're getting some big things done. We were the first European country to see the vital importance of helping the Ukrainians. But what people are going to get from this government, and they're going to get from me, is absolutely an undivided energy and attention on fixing the issues in the UK economy that cause unnecessary cost, and not just for consumers, but for people who need childcare. And for businesses as well. The UK is attracting huge sums of investment right now. Much more tech investment than any other country, much more in Europe, and much more venture capital investment even than China. There are some things that are going really well, but there are some parts of our system that need change and reform. And the energy market is one, the housing market is one, our transport system is another. All these have impacts on people's cost of living. And we can do things that will really help. And of course, the biggest single expenditure that people have, the households have, is taxation. That's the biggest chunk that they contribute. We want to get, and we are the party that believes in cutting taxes, we're the government that believes in cutting taxes, and we want to get into a situation where sensibly and responsibly we can turbocharge the attractions of the UK as a place to come and invest by having the best possible tax framework as well for businesses and for families. Darren McCaffrey, GB
Thank you very much, Prime Minister. Are you in denial then about the election results? I mean, in the sense that most voters, lots of Tory MPs, don't think this is simply about government policy, but it's about you, that you are a drag to some on the Conservative vote. Do you at least accept, in part, that narrative is true? And second of all, on Rwanda and the migrant scheme, we heard from the Rwandan government yesterday that they had received and spent £120 million from the British government. Have they received the money? And second of all, if no migrants are sent here, can we claw that money back? Or is that £120 million essentially gone for good?
Thanks. So, look, first of all, on my attitude to by-elections, if governments crumpled because of by-election results in the whole of the post-war period, we wouldn't have had many post-war governments. And that, I'm afraid, of course, we need to listen to the messages that we're getting. We need to learn. But in the end, we've got to get on and deliver for the British people, and that is what we're doing. And on your point about the Rwanda immigration and economic partnership, economic development partnership, it has many facets. I'm confident that the migration aspect will work very well. I think that it's notable that so far no UK court has found it to be unlawful, and no international court has found it to be unlawful. So I'm confident that we will be able to go ahead and develop a solution that I think whose time has come. If you look at the problems that the world faces with illegal migration, you can see that other countries, it's not just us in the UK, where we're out in front, but other countries are trying this. And you see what Joe Biden's been doing in the US, an idea for people coming from Mexico to go to Spain. You see the Danes are doing something very similar. You've got to find a way of breaking the model of the people smugglers. People smugglers, people traffickers are doing a profoundly evil and dangerous thing. And you have to find a way of stopping that. So we're going to continue with the policy, and you talk about will we get a refund? I'm confident that it will produce value for money. The current cost of the asylum system in our country is about 1.5 billion, and I think 5 million every day at least on hotel bills. So this is a very, very expensive business already, and I think the Rwanda partnership offers a good way forward. Esther Weber, Politico.
Thank you, Prime Minister. I was wondering if we could get your reaction to the decision by the Supreme Court in America to overturn Roe v. Wade, and whether you think abortion rights should be protected by the state.
Sorry, yes, Esther, look, I'd be absolutely clear with everybody. This is not our court, it's another jurisdiction, but clearly it has massive impacts on people's thinking around the world. It's a very important decision. I've got to tell you, I think it's a big step backwards. I've always believed in a woman's right to choose, and I stick to that view, and that's why the UK has the laws that it does. And actually, if you look, we recently took steps to make sure that those laws were enforced throughout the whole of the UK. Henry Zeffman, The Times.
You were talking earlier, Prime Minister, about wanting to cut taxes. That's going to ring quite hollow, not only to the many Conservative MPs who want you gone, but also to lots of voters when the tax base is the highest it's been in decades. So, or tax burden, rather. So, can you be a bit more specific?
Yeah.
Are taxes going to start falling for voters next year?
Henry, let me tell you what's happening now. And first of all, I think most people, I've tried to spell out the fiscal context that we're operating in. We went through a really miserable and expensive pandemic. I've given you the figures for the amount of taxpayers' money we've had to put just into the railways or aviation. And that doesn't grow on trees. 408 billion altogether we had to find to support families, businesses up and down the country. But at the same time, thanks to the sensible management of the economy that Rishi has been engaged on, we're able now, next month, you asked when, Henry, next month, you'll see tax cuts of an average of £330 off everybody who pays national insurance contributions. We're already cutting council tax by £150. We've cut fuel duty by a record amount. And, I say that not in any way, I know that won't slake your thirst satiate your appetite for tax cuts, but it shows the direction we're trying to go in. But you've got to be sensible and you've got to be responsible at the same time. And we're in a position still where we have to make sure that we look after people through tough times, and that's why the £1,200 that we're giving the most vulnerable households is also very important. Let's go to Berna Namata from the East African.
Thank you, Prime Minister. My question regards to your outgoing role as chair of the Commonwealth. Do you take responsibility for abandoning the developing members of the Commonwealth during the pandemic with travel bans, reluctance to share vaccines, reducing the aid budget, and more recently, the UK not availing its unused SDR reserves? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Well, Berna, actually, I think when you look at what the UK did during the pandemic, it was pretty remarkable. And I know that we would always want to do more, but particularly when it came to vaccines that you mentioned, we supplied the people, the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine that was supplied at cost, thanks to the deal that we did with AstraZeneca, thanks to the investments we made in that project. 1.4 billion doses were distributed around the world. It was the world's most popular vaccine, I think. And I mean, I had it. I don't know if anybody else has had AstraZeneca. It was something that was made possible thanks to the contribution of the UK, of UK ODA spending, and I think that's a great thing. James, but by the way, may I say, as outgoing chair in office. You mentioned our job as chair in office of the Commonwealth. I just want to pay particular tribute to Rwanda for what they're doing. I think it has been a fantastic summit so far, and I wish them every possible success. I wish President Kagame every possible success. James Karahanga from the New Times.
Thank you, Prime Minister. Thank you, Prime Minister. I listened to the responses you gave the UK Parliament a few days ago about the question of the genocide fugitives in your country. And I keep wondering, is justice delayed, not just denied? What's your take on that? Yeah. Is it even a Commonwealth value to delay justice for over 2 decades?
Thank you very much, James. And this is a case of I think it's the 4 genocidaires who are in London. And I answered a question in Parliament the other day. And look, I went to the genocide memorial yesterday, and nobody could go there without being absolutely harrowed by what happened here in Rwanda. I understand people's feelings. And so what I said to President Kagame yesterday is that I will do everything I can to try to expedite this. It is in that, so you understand, it's in the hands of the Metropolitan Police. I can't intervene directly, but I will certainly be raising it with them. And I understand why people in Rwanda feel as you do. I completely agree, and that's why I've said what I've said to you, to President Kagame. If we can do anything more to bring genocidaires to justice, then we will certainly do that. And what I've said I will do is raise it with the Metropolitan Police. And we're having, as you know, a new head of the Met very soon. Okay, I was going to knock it on the head there, but I can see. I'll take one more question from Beth, and then from you, sir.
Prime Minister, just to follow up on some of the other questions around the by-elections, if I may. You put the results down to midterm blues and problems.
No, I didn't say that. Yeah.
But Oliver Dowden put it down to far more to that today. He said supporters were, quote, distressed and disappointed by recent events, and he shared their feelings. He said we cannot carry on as business as usual and someone should take responsibility. And then he said volunteers and staffers deserve better than this. I know you've dismissed suggestions you've resigned as crazy and you intend to carry on and you won the confidence vote. But I imagine some colleagues back in London might be pretty astonished watching this press conference, given that you've been asked repeatedly and you don't seem to acknowledge that you could be part of the problem. You and your conduct could be part of the problem with voters. Why won't you acknowledge that? I mean, you're safe. You've won the confidence vote.
Let me try to give you the best answer I can, which is that, first of all, on Oliver, I think he did a lot of good work, particularly as chairman, but also as Secretary of State for DCMS, on broadband rollout, on veterans affairs and other things. I thank him for his service. But I'm genuinely don't think the way forward in British politics is to focus on issues of personalities, whether they are mine or others. The way forward is to make arguments to people about change and improvement that we are delivering. And that is what I want to do. I think the government has got some difficult stuff right. People are now going through a tough time. We understand that. I think that we have the best way forward. I think that we understand how to fix our economic issues, how to make sure that we have a stronger economy, and that is what we're going to achieve. I think some signs are promising, but I've got to be clear with people, as I was during the pandemic. I think it will take some time, and there will still be some tough times ahead. No doubt, Beth, people will continue to beat me up and say this or that about and to attack me. That's fine. That's quite right. That is the job of politicians. In the end, voters, journalists, they have no one else to make their complaints to. I have to take that, but I also have to get on with the job of delivering for the people of this country, and that's what I was elected to do. And I'm going to take one last question.
Prime Minister, my name is Ethan. I'm from Rwanda TV. Rwanda and the UK are working together on several development projects. As a matter of fact, the UK is the biggest donor in Rwanda. Are you satisfied with the results that you've seen so far in your few days here? And what memories do you take with you back home? And if you could as well tell us, Togo, Gabon, and Zimbabwe are requesting to rejoin the Commonwealth. Do you have the latest from the meetings you had? Thank you.
Well, thank you. Well, look, I was longing to come to Rwanda. I was very sad that the summit kept being postponed. It has certainly lived up to my expectations. It's an incredible country and clearly the product of really vaulting imagination. To take somewhere that had really been in the very depths of despair after the genocides, and then to work and work and work to create a culture, an environment that is clean, focused on so many things, so many values that I think are admirable. So, whatever the difficulties that may exist between my country and Rwanda about this or that, and of course there are going to be issues that we're going to continue to raise, and quite properly. But my overwhelming impression is of a remarkable country, and I wish I'd been able to see some of the countryside, but I haven't. On your question about Gabon and Togo, we'll just have to wait and see. And Zimbabwe, that is a matter for the Commonwealth. And I've taken two more. Thank you all very much. Thank you. Thank you.
Conference, there he is, Boris Johnson, talking with regard at that conference in the Commonwealth in Rwanda. Interesting stuff. If you just joined me, I'm Nana Akua. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. Welcome again to my panel, former Conservative advisor Claire Pearsall and also broadcaster Danny Kelly. Right, well, Boris Johnson, he's just spoken at the Commonwealth conference in Rwanda. Claire, you're a Conservative advisor. What do you make of the things that he said? There were a few things he said. He talked about a fund that would help to create things like drought-resistant crops. He sort of deflected things about himself personally. Your view?
Yeah, and I think sometimes it's right to look at actually what he's there for. He is there for the Commonwealth Head of Government's conference. So looking at what's happening in the UK isn't helpful, and things like drought-resistant crops and how you're going to get grain out of Ukraine, given the situation, it is really, really important. I don't think we can ignore what's happened this morning in the UK, but that wasn't the news conference where that should have come up.
You don't think so?
No, I don't, because it is slightly more important. I think all of those questions that he was just going to avoid, and we all knew that he would avoid them. So to keep asking them and to watch him get irritated, I don't think is doing us any favours on the world stage. I really, really don't. There are many other important things to do. And I say that as a, quite a harsh critic of the Prime Minister at the best of times. But I think this is a much more important situation that he's in. Yeah. And there should be another press conference where we can address the situation that happened over last night in the early hours of this morning with the two by-elections.
Well, I mean, the other thing is, to be honest, to be fair to Beth Rigby, it did come across as quite a trivial question to be asking on such a global stage, in my view. But Boris Johnson also said that what people want is the government to focus on their concerns, issues with transport, energy, and make things more productive. Do you think that Boris was right to sort of focus on that sort of narrative?
One of the great things about that Beth Rigby question was that I could hardly hear her ask that question. And it did irritate him. And I'm with you, Claire. I hadn't even considered. I think it's rather offensive to the people of Rwanda who've put on this display in a press conference for her to really attack him on a fella called Oliver Dowden, who 99% of the people in Rwanda don't even give a damn about. They don't know who he is. They're concerned about their future, about aid, multi-billion-pound packages of aid to assist them. So I think that's right, Claire. That's a great point. I thought he came out rather well. I thought he was composed. He was measured. And, you know, he was at times irritated, but I think he was irritated because probably he felt embarrassed that Beth Rigby was asking a question like that when he's in Rwanda talking about other stuff.
Yeah, I mean, there were actually 4 journalists who asked sort of the trivial kind of, if we say the sort of Partygate tracks type sort of Westminster-centric questions instead of actually focusing on global issues, which is what we really, really want to talk about. What did you think? What did you view on his response? We had that very intelligent question. I didn't manage to get it all down because she asked a lot. But she talked about the fact that basically a lot of the wealthier countries hadn't helped out a lot of the poorer Commonwealth countries with things like travel bans. She said travel bans, which obviously hurt those countries not sharing vaccines. She pointed that out as well. Boris only answered one element of that question. It was a good question.
It was, and I think it was the East African publication, the journalist from that, which it was an extremely good question, and I wish that we could get an answer to all of that, because I don't think that he answered succinctly or at all the question of sharing of vaccines. And that was a big issue come the pandemic, is that the richer nations were not willing to put enough into those nations that couldn't afford it, couldn't get them distributed. Whatever your view on vaccinations, we had them, we should have shared what we had. And I think that was really, really important. And that is obviously what is on the minds of those countries out in Africa at the moment. So we absolutely need to look at what we could have done better. I don't think he answered it. I don't think he gave her the credibility that she deserved on that question at all.
I was going to say, I was going to say, to be honest, and in his defence, I think that's a bit simplistic in a sense, because actually a lot of those African nations did not want to take the vaccine and wouldn't have taken it even if you'd given it to them. That was a big thing. They are distrustful of the West, and I would say that was a large proportion. So even though we think, oh, we'll come down and the nice Westerners will give you the vaccine, a lot of them would have refused it. Just like even with Ebola, when Ebola was there, they didn't trust the Western medicine and the ideas that the Westerners had. So I think just to sort of balance that off. But, I mean, look, if you've just joined us, I'm Nana Akua. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. Now, we'll still be discussing more about that because after the break, we'll be doing our Great British Debate this out. And I'm asking, can Boris Johnson keep the keys to number 10? You heard him at the Commonwealth conference there. What do you think? Did he impress you? The Conservatives had a dreadful result in the by-elections, though. But first, let's get your latest news headlines.
Thanks, Nana. Good afternoon. It's 4:35. I'm Bethany Elsey in the GB newsroom. The Prime Minister has said he will listen and learn from his double by-election defeats. The Liberal Democrats overturned a 24,000 Tory majority in Tiverton and Honiton, while Labour reclaimed the Red Wall seat of Wakefield overnight. Speaking at a press conference in Rwanda, Boris Johnson said he won't pretend they are brilliant results, but also said he's adamant to keep going. The US Supreme Court has voted to overturn the constitutional right to choose abortion, which has existed in the country for almost 50 years. The landmark 1973 Roe v. Wade ruling legalised abortion rights nationwide. The power to decide on abortion for tens of millions of women will now be handed to the 50 states to determine individually. The number of people in hospital with COVID-19 is on the rise in most parts of the UK, suggesting the virus is becoming steadily more prevalent. The latest data from the Office for National Statistics shows overall infections continue to go up in all 4 nations, with the increase likely to be driven by the latest Omicron variants, BA4 and BA5. And the child killer James Watson has been jailed for life with a minimum term of 15 years for the murder of 6-year-old Ricky Neve in 1994. The 41-year-old was 13 when he lured the schoolboy to woods near his home in Peterborough and strangled him. He was identified by DNA on Ricky's clothes following a re-examination of the case 2 decades later. On TV, online and DAB+ radio, this is GB News. We'll get back to Nana in just a moment.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV, on radio, on digital.
Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices.
With honest and civilised conversation.
We're not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
And the national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join us for Ministry of Defence, the comedy panel show that's just like the news, in that the left fights the right and it doesn't really seem to matter who wins. We cover the big stories. It was in fact a troop of baboons and not angry vegans.
I like that.
And the really important stories.
Fat naked cow gets stuck in swimming pool.
It's a headline in a lot of local newspapers. Yeah.
We're on the same team, Nick. Yeah, but I'm just helping you.
Join us for Ministry of Defence, Saturday nights, 8 o'clock on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Good afternoon. It's coming up to 39 minutes after 4 o'clock. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. Let's quickly go over to Darren McCaffrey. He's there in Rwanda. He was speaking to Boris Johnson. Darren, we heard your question. Did you feel that Boris answered it satisfactorily? And just repeat it so that those who missed it can hear what you asked.
Yeah, really fascinating, isn't it, Nana, in many regards. Prime Minister repeatedly essentially asked whether he was in many ways, as I put it, kind of denial about what had happened in those two by-elections last night, clearly losing Tiverton down in the southwest to the Lib Dems and to Wakefield to Labour in the north. This sense that the Prime Minister's tried to portray this all day in various different interviews, that he wants to get on with focusing essentially on the issues that matter to the British public, the cost of living crisis, rising cost of fuel, the taxation that people are having to pay, and that is what he argues, laser focused on. But the question fundamentally is about whether he is part of the problem for some voters out there, that many Conservatives may well have stayed at home in those two by-elections simply because they couldn't or wouldn't turn out to vote for the Prime Minister. And that was something that Oliver Dowden, the Cabinet Minister, the chairman of the Conservative Party who resigned in the early hours of this morning, essentially alluded to, that he felt the Prime Minister wasn't taking responsibility in many ways for what may have happened. And it is interesting, the Prime Minister not prepared really to give an inch on that. He was not really even prepared to indulge in the question. Yes, he talked about being a politician and being kind of battered by all sides, and that was fundamentally his job. But he was not prepared to concede ground that he personally might be a drag on the Conservative vote. So it is interesting, and it is also fascinating, isn't it, that this afternoon we've heard from some Conservative Cabinet Ministers who've come out in the wholesome and fulsome support for the Prime Minister, others staying pretty quiet with reports and rumours that they've pulled out of weekend interviews in the days to come, simply because things remain very, very tricky for Boris Johnson.
And very briefly, Darren, because we're sort of running out of time, what sense did you get in Rwanda? Because obviously there's been the tension because of the comments that, of course, allegedly Prince Charles made. Are you getting a sense that that there's a bit of tension towards the British there?
Yeah, really fascinating, isn't it? There was a lot of speculation yesterday about how that meeting might well go between Prince Charles and Boris Johnson. Of course, Prince Charles had reportedly called the migrant scheme the government has set up, where we could see hundreds, thousands of migrants sent, failed migrants from the UK to Rwanda every year, as appalling. Now, we don't know, of course, they never publicly talk about what they talk about in private, but we don't think the issue was brought up. Relations between Prince Charles and the Prime Minister, you heard from him there, he insists that they are good, of course. But yes, I think there has been a bit of unease between at least Number 10 and Clarence House on this issue. though it must be said, I think the government potentially wanted a bit of a row over all of this as well. What is fascinating, I think also kind of follow up on the question I asked the Prime Minister, is that the government has sent £120 million to the Rwandan authorities here. They told us yesterday they'd effectively spent that money already. We got to see some of the accommodation the migrants will or potentially possibly might stay in earlier on today, and you'll see that footage on GBNews tomorrow. But it is possible that through court action or other means that actually no one arrives here in Rwanda, and it doesn't seem very clear that in those circumstances we might be able to get any of that money back. And so in the end, if, and it is a big if, no fair migrants arrive here, it could be £120 million badly spent by the government. Boris Johnson's argument is that at least they have come up with an idea, a plan he argues will work, and a plan that others across Europe are starting to think about replicating.
Well, listen, Darren, thank you so much for joining us. That's Darren McCaffrey live in Rwanda at the Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting. Right, well, it's time for the Great British Debate this hour, and I'm asking, after you've heard all that, what do you think? Can Boris Johnson keep the keys to number 10? A triple blow for the Prime Minister just in a matter of weeks after he survived a confidence vote in his leadership. Then the Conservatives losing not one but two by-elections last night. And this morning, the Tory party chair, Oliver Dowden, resigned from his role. The traditional red wall seat of Wakefield, which the Conservatives won in the 2019 election, is now back in the hands of the Labour Party. Minutes after the declaration of the Wakefield and the Liberal Democrats who took Tiverton and Honiton, are these the signs that things are not looking good for the Conservatives? So for the Great British Debate this hour, I'm asking, can Boris Johnson keep the keys to number 10? I'm joined now by Conservative MP for Lichfield, Michael Fabricant. Michael, good to talk to you. Bit of a triple blow.
To you, Nana.
Do you consider this a triple blow for the Tories? They lost 2 seats and then Oliver Dowden resigns. What do you think? Are you worried?
Well, I've been doing some number crunching and I've actually been doing a bit of hard work. And the figures behind all the elections are actually very, very revealing. If I can just take Wakefield and then I'll take Honiton and Tiverton, it shows, both of them show that there hasn't been switching. Normally you get switching from Conservative voters to Labour or Lib Dem. This didn't happen in either election. In Wakefield, Labour actually lost support. They went down from 28% of the vote to 20%. Now, the Conservatives just stayed at home, and that's one of the reasons why they won, why Labour won Wakefield, although their majority actually went down. Their majority went down from 10,174 when they last won it in 2017, and is now only, well, it's under 5,000. And Honiton and Tiverton is also very interesting. The Lib Dems went up by 4 points, but only 4 points, from 25% to 29%. But again, 20,000 Conservatives didn't switch, but they stayed at home. And this, of course, is a big worry. And one of the things we're going to have to sort out is precisely why they did stay at home. Was it because of the industrial disputes? Was it because of the COVID and all the rest of it? Or was it because of Boris Johnson? And at the moment, the evidence is it wasn't because of Boris Johnson, and Partygate was not a major issue.
I was going to say as well, both the Conservative MPs who lost their seats, lost them under, well, should we say, interesting situations. I mean, there was Neil Paris who resigned
difficult
after...
circumstances,
well,
of course. I mean, both involved in sleaze. One was prosecuted, as we know, in Wakefield regarding a young boy, and the MP for Honiton and Tiverton, of course, had been looking at porn in the chamber, which was also most unfortunate. So there were local circumstances too.
I was going to say, because it does seem like people are just laying the blame straight at Boris Johnson, but actually nobody's mentioning the circumstances with which those MPs actually had to resign. And those circumstances don't help the Conservative Party. And I could understand why, if you voted for your MP and he represents the Conservative Party and that happened, you wouldn't really feel like voting Conservative again, potentially. So it's not all Boris's fault. How do you feel about Oliver Dowden, then? He's resigned.
Yes, I think it's unfortunate that he's resigned. I think there are many reasons why he may have left the party, or not the party, I should say, but as party chairman. He's made that personal choice. Maybe in weeks to come, I'll speculate precisely why he decided to go. But he's gone, and I guess he decided that he's the one to take and carry the can. But you know what? I don't actually think he need feel too ashamed. I think the party organisation went well. It's just that Conservative voters stayed at home. As I said, it wasn't, the economy, it's tough times. I mean, Macron, for example, although he scraped in as president, his parliamentary elections means he no longer has control in the Assemblée Nationale. So it's tricky times, but we've got to remember it's midterm, 2.5 years into a Conservative government. And unlike other elections, this one, we didn't see people crossing across to Labour. If I was Keir Starmer, I'd be very, very worried indeed. And in fact, one election I do remember very much where there was a 21% swing to Labour was Mid Staffordshire, which was the name of my old Lichfield seat. And a Labour MP was elected after a 21% swing to Labour in a by-election. 2 years later, I got elected. I won it back.
Well, I'm going to ask you now, because a lot of people would say that actually these are the worst by-election results in history. Do you think Boris Johnson can keep the keys to number 10?
I think he will. I think this was built in, in a way, the fact that I think most Conservative MPs would have been very pleasantly surprised if Tiverton had actually been retained by the Conservatives. And my gosh, if we'd actually won Wakefield, I think we'd have had a collective nervous breakdown out of sheer pleasure. But I don't think this is actually a crucial time for Boris Johnson. Where there will be a problem is when the Privileges Committee gives a report back in September, October, November this year, and that will be all about, as we know, whether or not he knowingly lied to the House of Commons. I don't think he did, but we shall see. That is actually the testing point, not this by-election.
Right. Well, I suppose it's midterm. We don't expect great results especially for the party in power. But what about Keir Starmer? If we look to him, he said today's results indicate that the British public want a change. That's his view. Do you think there's...
Well, the truth of the matter is he knows full well that the British public don't want to change, because both by-elections, both the one in Wakefield and the one in Honiton, even though there was a Lib-Lab pact where the Liberals didn't campaign in Wakefield and Labour didn't campaign in Honiton, despite all of that, there wasn't any switching virtually at all from the Conservatives to Labour or Conservatives to the Lib Dems. And for the Labour vote to actually fall from 28% to 20% is quite something. Labour at the moment only enjoy a lead of about 3 or 4% nationally. This is no way he's going to win the election. Don't forget the time of Tony Blair, when just before the 1997 election, when there was the huge swing to Labour, he was 24 to 30 points ahead in the polls. Labour is nowhere near this, so Keir Starmer is kidding himself. And of course, it'll be interesting to see exactly what Durham Constabulary are going to do regarding the famous Beergate incident. We haven't heard from them because they sent out a questionnaire to Keir Starmer, who left it to the very last minute to reply, just in case he was prosecuted before the by-election. But that's yet to come.
Well, yes, that is yet to come, and of course it has got ongoing. Maybe the change is actually him, Keir Starmer. Listen, Michael, it's really good to talk to you. That's Michael Papwood, MP, as a Conservative for Lichfield. Lovely to talk to you. Right, so you're with me. I'm Nana Akua. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. After the break, we will continue with our Great British Debate, and today I'm asking, can Boris Johnson keep the keys to number 10? But first, a short break.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV, on radio, on digital.
Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices.
With honest and civilised conversation.
We're not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
And the national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, the comedy panel show that's just like the news, in that the left fights the right and it doesn't really seem to matter who wins. We cover the big stories. It was in fact a troop of baboons and not angry vegans.
I like that.
And the really important stories.
Fat naked cow gets stuck in swimming pool.
It's a headline in a lot of local newspapers. Yeah.
We're on the same team, Nick. Yeah, but I'm just helping you.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, Saturday nights, 8 o'clock on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Good afternoon. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. I'm Nana Akua. We have a great British debate this hour. I'm asking, can Boris Johnson keep the keys to number 10? I'm joined now by the former editor of the Labour list, Peter Edwards. Peter, good to talk to you. Right, so Labour, they retook the seat of Wakefield, West Yorkshire. It lost at the 2019 general election. Is this a good sign for the party?
Yeah, it's a good sign, but of course there's an awful lot more to do for Labour if it's going to win. I was listening to an interview with Michael Fabricant, the Tory backbencher. He mentioned opinion polls. I had a quick look back. Been around 50-odd opinion polls this year. Keir Starmer's been ahead in every single one of them, apart from one, a lead up to 13 points at times. So not quite matching what Tony Blair did in the year before election. But of course, we're probably not a year before election. We're a little bit further out. It's right that Labour has a lengthy rebuild after the failed Corbyn project, but public trust, as a by-elections show this week in completely different seats at different ends of England, public trust is ebbing away in Boris Johnson.
Well, but I'll just bring the point that I made to Michael Fabricant, that actually, if you look at the two MPs who lost their seats, they did it for they lost their seats on terrible reasons, you know. So anybody, if you voted Conservative and you had that, it's actually, in a sense, it's really they lost their seats. Would you blame a large part of that on Partygate and Boris Johnson, or do you think that actually this really falls? You would?
Yeah, and like me, you know, you're a keen watcher of Westminster. There are scandals in every parliament, and of course, the two that led to by-elections in the southwest in Wakefield were particularly horrible ones. But there are scandals in every by-election, and then immediately you have both a local vote that no one saw coming, and also a localised poll in the Prime Minister. And that's what it is. And I think the other thing I noticed, apart from the fact that by-elections are always, to a certain extent, feedback on the Prime Minister and the government of the day, is how many third-party games, i.e. the Lib Dems, are then lost again at the next general election. So it's not just feedback on Boris Johnson. I'd really urge Lib Dems not to get too cocky after today, when, for example, they won in Richmond Park in London in a by-election, then lost that as well next time around.
Yeah, well, there's no real alternative. If you don't vote Labour, you'll do that. And anyway, apparently, so many people saying there was a pact. Now, although the turnout was quite low, actually, 39%, that's what some people are saying. 39% of people, only 39% of people went out to vote. So that's not really that much, is it, in comparison?
Well, again, yeah, by-election turnout tends to be a bit lower, doesn't it? And to me, as a Democrat and a voter, that's really sad. But we always know that in a general election, when the whole country is choosing its new Prime Minister, or the same Prime Minister, turnout is higher, although it's dropped over my lifetime, the last sort of 40 years. I think the issue, when you go to turnout, and Michael Fabricant was keen on this with some very selective choice of stats, it's not always about switchers, because in the past, Labour have suffered and Ed Miliband suffered with their voters staying at home, not necessarily switching, just staying away. And now I certainly feel in both by-elections this time around and in the last Lib Dem gain, the government lost from its voters just staying at home. So they, government supporters don't need to switch to get the government in trouble. The government are already in trouble, as we saw last night. And what Labour needs to do is kind of revive a few non-voters, which is a tall order. Ed Miliband struggled a bit with that, but that's why you've got to infuse people as well as stuff them with the policy detail.
Well, listen, Peter, I think I know the answer then, because I'm going to ask you whether Boris Johnson can keep the keys to number 10. You're going to say no. So thank you very much, Peter. It's good to talk to you. That is Peter Edwards. He's the former editor of the Labour List. Right, let's see what my panel make of that. I'm joined by former Conservative advisor Claire Pilsall and also broadcaster Danny Kelly. I'm going to start with you, Danny, this time.
I must admit, when Mr Fabricant said that the 20,000 Tory voters stayed at home, I thought that was eternal optimism. But when you actually reflect, there is some sense to that. There is some sense, and maybe he's correct. I've never known Conservative voters stay at home, though. So that's a new one to me. I've known Conservative voters tend to be more motivated, in my experience, to cast their vote. But maybe I've been wrong about that. Can he keep the keys to number 10? I think he can keep the keys to number 10. Don't forget, in 2019, Boris Johnson went to these Labour seats saying, lend me your vote to get Brexit done. Now, that was only a temporary borrowing of a vote, and I think now we're going to see the repaying of that. The vote was lent, Brexit was done, and now they're going to Labour.
It's just a psychological thing, though, because you can't get someone to vote and say, I've got your vote and it's my vote forever. So it's just words, isn't it, Claire?
It is, and I think that this is actually indicative of the general public's malaise with politics as a whole. I don't think it's necessarily distrust in the Conservatives, although I think this is a referendum into the Prime Minister, so I disagree with Michael Fabricant on that. But I think it's actually much more than that, and it's politics as a whole. And trust in politics and politicians is at an all-time low.
For all of them.
For absolutely everybody. The success in Wakefield wasn't a massive success for Keir Starmer. You know, let's be honest, when you start looking at the figures, and you can bandy around statistics and figures and polling information as much as you like, realistically, it wasn't much of a gain for Labour. We did lose it. And again, with Tiverton and Honiton, the Lib Dems took it from us. Our votes stayed at home. But either way, these two are a loss to us.
And I suppose they can't just rely on people's votes. Let's see what you think. This show is nothing without you and your views. Let's welcome our great British voice, your opportunity to be on the show and tell us what you really think about what we're discussing. Right, where should we head over to? Oh, let's go to Bedfordshire. Let's have a chat with property expert Julie Ford. Julie, so briefly then, because we've got about a minute with you, just what do you think? Can Boris Johnson keep hold of the keys to number 10?
Hi, Nana. Yeah, actually, I think he can. But I think the question I want to be asking is, does he want to? Because in that press conference today, that man looked exhausted. And I think maybe he's just had enough. So although I think, yeah, if he wants the keys, he can keep them. But I think for me, it's whether he genuinely wants it. Some of the questions that were coming from the press for him, he looked exasperated by them, and that's not something we normally see from Boris. He can normally talk his way out of it or joke his way out of it. And I think, again, some of the polls that we've been hearing lately as well, I think maybe he's just really just had enough.
Yeah, who would blame him? Thank you very much, Julie. Lovely to talk to you. That is Julie Ford. She's a property expert. You're watching me. I'm Nana Akua. This is GB News. More to come in the next hour. It's just gone 1 minute after 5 o'clock. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. We are the People's Channel, and for the next hour, me and my panel will be taking on some of those big topics hitting the headlines right now. But first, let's get your latest news headlines.
Thanks, Nana. Good afternoon. It's 1 minute past 5. I'm Bethany Elsey, here to get you up to date in the GB newsroom. The Prime Minister says his party will listen and learn from his double by-election defeats. The Liberal Democrats overturned a 24,000 Tory majority in the Devon seat of Tiverton and Honiton, while in West Yorkshire, Labour reclaimed the Red Wall seat of Wakefield. The Conservative Party co-chair Oliver Dowden reacted to the results by handing in his resignation, saying somebody needed to take responsibility. While speaking at a press conference in Rwanda, Boris Johnson denied his premiership had been dealt a blow.
My attitude to the
to by-elections. If governments crumpled because of by-election results in the whole of the post-war period, we wouldn't have had many post-war governments. And that, I'm afraid, of course, we need to listen to the messages that we're getting. We need to learn. But in the end, we've got to get on and deliver for the British people. And that is what we're doing.
The US Supreme Court has voted to overturn the constitutional right to choose abortion, which has existed in the country for 50 years. The landmark Roe v. Wade ruling legalised abortion rights nationwide in 1973. The power to decide on abortion will now be handed to the 50 states to determine individually, after the Conservative majority court upheld a Republican-backed Mississippi law that bans abortion after 15 weeks. The number of people in hospital with COVID-19 is on the rise in most parts of the UK, suggesting the virus is becoming steadily more prevalent. The latest data from the Office for National Statistics shows overall infections continue to go up in all 4 nations, with the increase likely to be driven by the latest Omicron variants, BA4 and BA5. Members of the RMT union who work on the London Underground have voted to continue industrial action over a dispute over jobs, pay and working conditions. 91% voted to strike in the coming weeks and months, although no dates have yet been decided. Train services across the UK have been disrupted this week due to RMT walkouts, with a 3rd day of strikes planned tomorrow. More unions say they'll ballot staff next week, making further disruption likely over the summer. Child killer James Watson has been jailed for life with a minimum term of 15 years for the murder of 6-year-old Ricky Neve in 1994. The 41-year-old was 13 when he lured the schoolboy to woods near his home in Peterborough and strangled him. Watson's been handed a term relevant to his age, a child himself at the time of the offence. He was identified by DNA on Ricky's clothes following a re-examination of the case 2 decades later.
I've seen somebody who's a fantasist, a compulsive liar, a sexual predator, and there were missed opportunities. And, there's lessons that have been learned, and those are lessons that will be learned in terms of moving forward.
Former model Katie Price has avoided jail after breaching a restraining order against her ex-husband's new partner. Price admitted sending abusive messages to Kieran Hayler about his fiancée in January. The former glamour model has been sentenced to an 18-month community order and will have to pay £1,500 in court costs. This is GB News. We'll bring you more news as it happens now. Let's get back to Nana.
Good afternoon. It's coming up to 6 minutes after 5 o'clock. If you've just joined me, I'm Nana Akua. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. And for the next hour, me and my panel will be taking on some of the big topics hitting the headlines right now. This show is all about opinion. It's mine, it's theirs, and it's yours. We'll be debating, discussing, and at times we will disagree, but no one will be cancelled. So joining me today, it's former Conservative advisor Claire Pearsall and also broadcaster Danny Kelly. Still to come each Friday at 5, we'll put the spotlight on a particular guest or subject matter in my feature Friday Focus. And this week, we're looking at school and, of course, the teachers' potential strike. Today, the National Education Union has demanded a pay rise for all teachers. They've written to Education Secretary Nadine Zahawi asking for sufficient action to help teachers deal with rising inflation. And if they don't get it, they're proposing a formal ballot or strike action. And for our Great British Debate this hour, I'm asking, would you be prepared to join the police? The Policing Minister, Kit Malthouse, has told GB News that the government is on track to deliver on its promise of 20,000 new police officers. But with recent policing scandals, which the service have been shaken by, today I'm asking, would you be prepared to work for them? Email gbnews@gbnews.uk or tweet me at gbnews. So it is now time for Friday Focus. Today we're looking at the teachers and, of course, the potential for strike. The National Education Union, that is the biggest teacher union, it used to be the NUT, said it would be throwing the kitchen sink at plans to ensure teachers get the pay rise they deserve. If not, They'll hold a ballot in the autumn term before a potential formal ballot on strike action. Now, this comes as prices are rising by 9.1% a year in the UK, the highest rate for 40 years. So I'm joined now by Chris McGovern. He's the chairman for Real Education. Now, Chris, are you also an NEU rep? Is that right? Am I right in saying that?
No, I was a member of teachers' unions. I actually sat on the TUC, so I'm not unsympathetic to trade unions at all.
What do you make of this from the NEU?
Well, I think it's deplorable. Look, I taught, as I say, 35 years. Early in my career, I did go on strike for one day, and I'm rather ashamed of that now. I regret that. I think it was a wrong thing to do. Young people have gone through a couple of years of lockdown and COVID and all sorts of pressures. So the last thing that teachers need to do now is to go on strike. That doesn't mean to say that teachers haven't got a case, but I think a lot of your viewers will be very surprised to know that according to government's own statistics, the majority of staff in schools are not actually teachers. And there's a lot of classroom assistants and other administrators. And we have a system of education which is very child-centred. So you go into any classroom, primary schools in particular in the country, you're very likely to see one or even two classroom assistants in the room. And that allows the children to work in groups around tables, often with their back to the teacher. It doesn't work and it's very expensive. So there is enough money in the pot to pay good teachers more, but it would mean changing the way we teach. So we go back to a more traditional style, not traditional in Singapore and Shanghai and Japan and so forth, a more traditional style, which is cheaper, and there'll be money left for good teachers. So I'm not against good teachers being paid more. They probably should be paid more. We need to attract good graduates to teach in the classroom. But our system of education is very high maintenance. No one mentions this. The MPs don't understand it. The Select Committee doesn't understand it. And I doubt whether the Secretary of State understands it. It's the way we teach children. It's very expensive. Change the way we teach the children, have fewer classroom assistants. We need some. There'll be more money in the pot, and then pay good teachers more. They deserve more.
But there is an issue, though, because I agree with you, obviously, if they could create a structure that would enable people to be paid better by going back to an older system. But what about the fact that very few people seem to want to be teachers in the first place? So because of a lot of the pressures of the job. So even if you change the system, there wouldn't be enough people wanting to do the job in any case.
Absolutely right, and that is absolutely true. What's putting teachers off teaching is that they're not allowed to teach. They're more likely to be social workers or psychiatrists. You know, these days, but even in primary schools, gender identity, racial diversity, I mean, good causes in many ways, but they actually take up a lot of teachers' time. If you're a math teacher or a physics teacher, and there's a shortage of those, you're probably thinking, well, I'm a math teacher, I'm a physics teacher, but I want to teach. I don't want to be doing social work. And yeah, it's putting off a lot of teachers. And also, there's a crisis because those teachers who are in the profession, within 5 years, I think nearly half of them now are thinking of leaving or want to leave, and a lot do leave. So we have got a crisis. And we don't talk about it because it's not a sexy subject. It's MP. You go to House of Commons, you look at the debates in education, and the room and the chamber empties. People in Parliament aren't that interested. But it's probably the most important debate we could possibly be having because we're talking about the future of our country, of our children, and we have to make sure that teachers actually are well rewarded. What I'm saying is that we have a very expensive system, which not only doesn't work, it is also costing a lot of money. We have to change the way we teach. And we can then raise standards and we can pay good teachers more. I don't want to pay poor teachers more. It's no good saying that all teachers are heroes, like the Education Secretary does. They're not all heroes. There are great teachers, there are average teachers, and there are poor teachers. The good teachers definitely need to be paid more, and they should be an attraction for young graduates coming into the profession, that they can be well paid. But most of all, we need to get back to some idea of teachers actually being teachers of a subject or of children in a primary school. They teach several subjects. So it's really about saying, look, it's a teaching job, you'll be allowed to teach. You're not allowed to teach these days as much as you are to do social work, which is not what most teachers want to do. They want to teach.
Yeah, to be fair, I'm sort of getting a bit sick and tired of, you have to use the right gender pronoun, you can't wear this, you have to do that. I mean, there does seem to be a lot of other things going on rather than actually teaching. What do you think, though, if there was strike action and it took place in the autumn? You've talked about it and you said it's deplorable. Is that because of the impact it would have mainly on the children?
Yeah, it's deplorable because children have suffered enough. They're getting a really rough time of it at the moment. And I think also it brings the profession into disrepute. Look, there are many fine teachers, and hopefully I was one of them. And I have a lot of respect for my colleagues. And then people in teaching, some of them do a tremendous job. But there is a variation, and of course good teachers need to be paid more. But you don't want good people to leave. If countries such as Finland, which is not too far away in the European Union, they're widely admired for their quality of their education. Well, they recruit from the top 20% of their graduates. On the whole, we recruit from the bottom 20%. Now, we need to recruit from we need to get the best people into teaching because it is that important. If there's a strike, yet it does bring the profession to disrepute, it's going to cause chaos, of course, because parents, what are they going to do? They also need schools to be open. And for the children themselves, what's the message it sends? It sends, look, if you don't get what you want, you go on strike. It's really destructive of society. So don't just dismiss the teachers' claim that many teachers do deserve more money, but look at the way we teach and look at how we spread the money out. We've got a very expensive education system. They're running a lot cheaper in Vietnam for about 10% of the money, and they get better results. We need to find out why. And there are various reasons, of course, but it includes the fact that they have more effective teaching methods and they reward their best teachers.
So, Chris, if people are dissatisfied, then what should they do? If they're a teacher, you're saying it's deplorable, but what else could they do then to show that they're dissatisfied?
Look, I sometimes get asked this question. In my supercilious moments, I say, well, you want to improve your child's chances? Well, I suggest you apply for educational asylum in Vietnam or China or Estonia or somewhere. That's been a bit supercilious. What can they do? Look, all we can do is to say to our MPs, listen to people who didn't create the problem. The problem is with education, is the Department for Education and the government. They always turn to the people who created the problem to solve the problem. They're going to get it wrong every time. They have for the last 40 years. A week or so ago, the Times published a major report on education. They had a commission and they spent several months talking to various people, not to us, I have to say. They've run a mile rather than talk to us. And they produced a 96-page report. Tell us how we can fix education. Well, I can tell you how to fix education. I don't need 96 pages, 2 words, good teaching. We've got to improve the quality of teaching. And MPs have got to get behind that. And they've got to consider, teaching professionals got to consider, and government's got to consider, just maybe there's a possibility we've got something wrong in education. And if you look at what have the government's achieved.
No, I hear all that. But, OK, but all I'm asking is, though, if they don't strike, what else could they do? You're saying just go to their MPs, talk to the MPs, and that would be the way that they should play.
What I would say, you've got to change the mindset. They've got to recognise that performance-related pay is important. They've got to recognise that we can't all be the same, and some people will deserve more than others. And also, they've got to recognise that teaching a class of 30 children with 2 classroom assistants is probably unaffordable. It's also damaging to children because if you go to these successful education systems, such as Estonia or Singapore or Shanghai, they have large classes, much larger than we have. 1 teacher at the front and all the children facing the teacher. It sounds common sense, but if you go to many English classrooms, probably every primary school in the country, you won't see that. You'll see children with their backs to the teacher around tables, and it's very inefficient. They don't learn. We know they don't learn because we're falling behind the rest of the world.
Well, that doesn't happen.
We've got to open up our minds and recognise there's other ways of doing it. But we don't do that. We have a closed mind in education.
Well, I hear you, but I actually lecture across the country and go to different schools, and nobody sits with their back to me. I can tell you that for now, Chris. Chris McGovern, it's good to talk to you. He's the chairman for the Campaign for Real Education. Right, so to discuss this further, James Kerr joins me now. He's on the line. He's a teacher and from the Lewisham branch of the National Education Union. So, James, right, so first of all, how likely do you think it is that the National Education Union will strike?
Well, I think that's ultimately a question that Nadeem Zahawi has to answer. We've given plenty of opportunity for this government to see sense on the question of teacher pay and also support staff pay as well. And that's ultimately linked to the question of funding and funding our schools properly and not having an education system on the cheap. So our ballot doesn't open tomorrow. It opens in the autumn on the basis that this government does not honour a decent pay rise, a living pay rise for education workers. So the ball is really in the government's court on this. Are they willing to fund education and actually put money into the state sector, or do they want a budget education on the cheap? I mean, we've already seen. I mean, this is not just from the National Education Union. We saw Sir Kevin Collins, who was their catch-up czar, resigning in disgust at the fact that the money that he had explained to the government needed to be earmarked to actually support young people coming out of the pandemic was completely dismissed by this government. So we don't want to strike. Why would our members want to lose pay by going on strike? Why would we want to disrupt young people's education? We want this to be settled, but we want it to be settled in a way that is actually going to keep people in the classroom, keep people working in schools, and so that they're not spending their entire life worried about the bills, worried about whether they need to take on a second job. So this is a question about pay, but it is ultimately, in the last analysis, it's about funding education properly. And this government hasn't funded education properly. And now, what we're seeing with inflation rising is a recruitment and retention crisis developing at a pace, and we need to stop that. If we want to have a decent education for our young people, then we need to have motivated, well-paid people in the classroom working with them. And this government at the moment doesn't seem to value that.
So the average pay for a teacher is sort of somewhere initially in the region of £25,000 to about £41,000. That's what I've got on here, and. Everyone would like more money. I mean, I'd like more money. Everyone wants more money. And a lot of people have to take on second jobs. Some people might argue that teachers actually have 6 weeks off in the summer. You've got a couple of holidays in between and things like that. Some people think that teachers have quite a good deal.
Well, why are we seeing a recruitment and retention crisis? If it's a cushy job with lots of perks, then we would see people flooding into the profession. But we're not. We're seeing we're seeing an historic crisis because workload is driving people out. Holidays themselves are often used to catch up with work, to recuperate from illness and so on from the term. So what ultimately. I would say to anyone who sat there thinking, well, teachers have got it good, why should they demand more pay? Actually, we all need a pay rise.
Yeah.
And the question, I would say to anyone is, if you're in a workplace where you're not being paid enough, you need to join a trade union, you need to get organised, you need to make a demand for a pay rise that you can live on. And actually, there is money in society, but it's concentrated into the hands of a tiny elite who have done incredibly well during this crisis, during the pandemic. We see some of the super rich doubling their wealth, the energy companies making record profits at our expense as our bills go up. So there is money in society. It's certainly not being hoarded by teachers, support staff, premises officers, teaching assistants. It's being hoarded by those who are making huge profits from the private sector.
Well, yeah, fair enough. But I think that's a bit of a broad brush to say that. It's not always like that. But, Chris, I just want to bring you back to something that Chris McGovern said. Sorry, James. Chris said that he said that the fact that this sort of strike action, he said it brings the profession into disrepute. What's your reaction to that?
I mean, firstly, I don't really understand what that means. Everyone has the right to organise and to join a union. And to take industrial action. Chris himself said that he took industrial action in the past, so clearly he was motivated by a subject. As I said, for us, strike action, industrial action is a real last resort. We haven't taken strike action for a number of years, but the situation that we're in is driving us to that position because, as we've seen this week, RPI inflation over 11%. I mean, if you're a teacher in a London. And you're at the top of the pay scale, so you're a relatively experienced teacher, your pay in real terms has fallen by over £10,000 since this government came into power. What are we meant to do? Chris's advice was speak to MPs. We've spent over a decade speaking to MPs who do not care about the state education sector because they haven't accessed it. Their children don't access it. They don't have an interest beyond actually furnishing the interests of big business. And of their economic system. We're done with talking to MPs if they're not going to listen. We've tried to engage them. We've tried to explain what the reality is in our schools. and they need to do something about it. And as I've said, strikes for us are a last resort, and we've got 3 months now to settle this dispute before the NEU would be balloting our members, and we want to see the government take some serious action on that. They're sitting on the School Teachers Review Body report, which they do every year, and every year they drop it on the first day of the holiday for teachers, finding out what their pay award is going to be for the next year. The Tories now need to come out with, what their plans are for education over the next 12 months, explain to the profession what they're going to do in relation to the cost of living crisis. And if they don't, then we are going to be pushed into a position where we're taking industrial action. We don't want to do that.
OK. Well, listen, James, thank you for your thoughts. Good to talk to you. That's James Kerr. He is a teacher and a member of the NEU in Lewisham. The NEU is the biggest teachers' union. Coming up, it is the Great British Debate this hour. And I'm asking, would you be prepared to join the police? Policing Minister Kit Malthouse has told GBNews that the government are on track to recruit 20,000 new officers. But have the public lost their confidence in the police force and the desire to join them? We'll get to the bottom of that when I ask during my Great British Debate. So I'm asking, would you be prepared to join the police? But first, let's take a quick break.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV,
On radio, on digital.
Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices.
With honest and civilised conversation.
We're not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
And the national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, the comedy panel show that's just like the news, in that the left fights the right and it doesn't really seem to matter who wins. We cover the big stories. It was in fact a troop of baboons and not angry vegans.
I like that.
And the really important stories.
Fat naked cow gets stuck in swimming pool.
It's a headline in a lot of local newspapers. Yeah.
we're on the same team, Nick. Yeah, but I'm just helping you.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, Saturday nights, 8 o'clock on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Right, you're with me. I'm Nana Akua. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. It's time for the Great British Debate this hour, and I'm asking, would you be prepared to join the police? The policing minister has exclusively told GB News he's very confident that the government will meet its target of 20,000 new officers across England and Wales by next March. Right, so Donna Jones is the Hampshire Police and Crime Commissioner, and she's a Conservative. She's there on the line now. Donna, thank you so much for joining me. So, first of all, let's talk about the police force, because a lot of people seeing all these different things happening. You had that awful murder, which was done by a serving police officer. You've had the Oldham situation as well. There are so many things that are putting people off. And now we hear in some places, in one place in particular, not even a single burglary being solved. Do you think that the police force is actually an appealing career at the moment?
I still really do. And actually, there are many police forces across the country who are not struggling to recruit people like the Metropolitan Police are. Policing provides a fantastic opportunity to really specialise if you want to. For example, working in online frauds and scams. If you are somebody who's drawn to data and someone who really likes to process that kind of online and keeping up with technology, Or if you like to work with the public, of course, neighbourhood policing. And of course, we have specialisms, particularly my force, Hampshire Police, also buddied with Thames Valley. We have police horses, we have police dogs, if you love working with animals. But ultimately, people go into a career in policing, whether that's as a police officer or as a member of police staff, because they want to help people and they want to give something back to their community. And let's not forget, you've also got a pretty good pension too.
That's great, and I'd love that. But you say it's great, but only 6% of crimes actually end up being solved, as far as we saw with the last sort of figures that I read. And also, there's been things like misogyny and all these different things in the force, and it just seems to be a little bit of an off-putting profession. I hear you, but why would anyone want to join the police force under all this? Do you think there needs to be change?
Well, Nana, I completely do accept the points that you make, and I think policing has been through the mill and back over the last 18 months, 2 years, particularly with those horrific incidents from London that we did hear about from over the last couple of years, and those tragic tragedies of women suffering at the hands of police officers. This has undoubtedly had a knock in confidence in trust in policing. I think that, that's absolutely, there's no way that anyone can disagree with that. And I do think that British policing has got some way to go now to really repair that trust and confidence, and to acknowledge that actually a number of the things that have been going on across the country, but very much centred around the Metropolitan Police, are not acceptable. But what we also need to remember are there are hundreds of thousands of people working for British police forces today that are absolutely, upstanding members of the public, just the right kind of people that should be working in policing, and they feel as aggrieved as you and I do about some of the atrocities that have happened by a very small number of police officers. So yes, it's right that this is acknowledged. There's no point in hiding away from that. But do I think that it's effective recruitment? No, I don't. In my own police force, our share of the 20,000 National Police uplift is 498 officers. We will hit our target in September this year. That is nearly 6 months ahead of the target by the end of March next year, March 23. Now, I want to go above and beyond the government's target. I have found the money to, in fact, recruit 600 police officers. So to go 102 over and above our target. We are not struggling to recruit people in Hampshire Constabulary. The reason being, we've got an excellent wellbeing package. We are a well-rated constabulary. We give people the opportunity for promotion. We listen to staff feedback. And, as Police and Crime Commissioner, I have an open door policy for any member of staff from Hampshire Constabulary to come and speak to me at any point. And they do. And they give me some great ideas on how we can improve things and change them. But that's not to take away from the fact that there have been issues. But I really think that one force, albeit the largest force in the country, does not necessarily reflect all of the other 42 police forces in the country.
Okay, well, I just want to bring back that 20,000 recruitment figure, because they're saying 20,000 people, and that is great. But what worries me about that is they might end up compromising the quality of the applicant. So, for example, in the case of Wayne Couzens, where he actually had certain convictions that if they'd actually done a bit of research, they could have found out that he wasn't probably the right sort of candidate. And my worry is that they're just trying to get more and more people doing it, but they're compromising on the quality of the candidates. Is that a concern for you?
In part, yes, it is actually. And I think whenever you have an amount of volume recruitment in one go, of course, it does put your recruitment teams, your training teams, it puts everybody under pressure. And there is no doubt that backfilling the reduction in police numbers over the last decade all in one go is not also therefore going to create problems for, recruitment, in years to come when the officers that have been recruited throughout 2020, 21 and 2022 and the beginning of 23 then retire and leave in 30, 35 years time, whenever that may be. Now, I've been with Minister Malthouse, Kit Malthouse, the policing minister, for this morning, for half the day today, talking about a number of different crime issues. And actually he and I are both absolutely committed to making sure that in this patch in Hampshire, but actually across the country, we have quality police officers recruited. There is, new vetting processes being considered now, and it's right and proper that through the government an inquiry has been launched to look at what happened to enable Wayne Couzens, who had a questionable time when he worked for the Civil Nuclear Division and Policing to then move into the Met Police and be put in the position he was of having a warrant card and abusing that on the streets of London. So there is an inquiry going on. Yes, absolutely mistakes were made, and that's why it's right and proper that the government, has an independent review to make sure that the vetting process is updated if it needs to be, and that these things can never happen again.
And I wanted to just touch on the fact that I thought now to be a police officer you have to have a degree. Is that still the case? And if so, why?
Yes, the Home Office made, or through the Home Secretary and the Policing Minister, Kit Malthouse, as I mentioned, made a decision going back almost 3 years ago now that they wanted to professionalise policing. They really wanted to give graduates the opportunity, but also for those that are coming into policing that are not graduates, to have the opportunity to be on a level playing field with their colleagues and to have that police degree. It's called the PEQF. Now, there has been some controversy around it. There have been chief constables who really don't like the police degree. They prefer the older 16-week core training for police officers. The police degree takes 2 years. And what it means is that for 30% of year one and 30% of year two of the officer's time, they are spent in the classroom learning, writing essays and doing the things that, of course, you need to do to get that sort of qualification. Now, in my own force, it was brought in by my chief constable, almost 3 years ago. It's running. There is a mixed bag in terms of the response from probationers, as we call them, student officers. Some really liking it, those that are already graduates, but some really struggling with it and saying it doesn't teach me how to be a police officer in the way I think it needs to be. It takes away from my time. I'm studying on my rest days. Of course, for me as a police commissioner, that is a concern. But those 3 or 4 forces that had held back from introducing PEQF have now been told by the government in the last 2 weeks they are going to need to continue and they are going to need to introduce the police degree.
Well, see, with people like you, Donna, I think you'd inspire anyone to join. Donna Jones, thank you very much for joining us. She's the Hampshire Police and Crime Commissioner. She's a Conservative as well. Right. So you're with me, I'm Nana Akua. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. We'll continue with our Great British Debate this hour. I'm asking, would you be prepared to join the police? You'll hear the thoughts of my panel, former Conservative advisor Claire Bissell, and also broadcaster Danny Kelly. But first, let's get your latest news headlines.
Good afternoon. It's just gone 34 minutes past 5. I'm Bethany Elsey in the GB newsroom. The Prime Minister says his party will listen and learn from his double election defeats. The Liberal Democrats overturned a 24,000 Tory majority in the Devon seat of Tiverton and Honiton, while in West Yorkshire, Labour reclaimed the Red Wall seat of Wakefield. The Conservative Party co-chair Oliver Dowden reacted to the results by handing in his resignation, saying somebody needed to take responsibility. Speaking at a press conference in Rwanda, Boris Johnson denied his premiership had been dealt a blow.
My attitude to by-elections, if governments crumpled because of by-election results in the whole of the post-war period, we wouldn't have had many post-war governments. And that, I'm afraid, of course, we need to listen to the messages that we're getting. We need to learn. But in the end, we've got to get on and deliver for the British people. And that is what we're doing.
The US Supreme Court has overturned the constitutional right to choose abortion, which has existed in the country for almost 50 years. The landmark Roe v. Wade ruling legalised abortion rights nationwide in 1973. The power to decide abortion laws will now be handed to the 50 states to determine individually. The killer of 6-year-old Ricky Neve almost 28 years ago has been jailed for life with a minimum term of 15 years. James Watson was 13 when he left the schoolboy's body in the woods near his home in Peterborough in 1974. He was identified by DNA on Ricky's clothes following a re-examination of the case 2 decades later. The number of people in hospital with COVID-19 is on the rise in most parts of the UK, suggesting the virus is becoming steadily more prevalent. Official figures estimate 1.7 million people had COVID in the UK last week, a 23% rise from the week before. It's likely the increase is driven by the latest Omicron variants, BA4 and BA5. On TV, online and DAB plus radio, this is GB News. We'll get back to Nana in just a moment.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News for gold and silver investment.
Here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. A few moments ago, the pound was 1.227 against the dollar and 1.164 against the euro. The price of gold currently stands at £1,488.68 per ounce.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News for gold and silver investment.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV,
On radio, on digital.
Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices.
With honest and civilised conversation.
We're not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, the comedy panel show that's just like the news, in that the left fights the right and it doesn't really seem to matter who wins. We cover the big stories. It was in fact a troop of baboons and not angry vegans.
I like that.
And the really important stories.
Fat naked cow gets stuck in swimming pool.
It's a headline in a lot of local newspapers. Yeah.
we're on the same team, Nick. Yeah, but I'm just helping you.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, Saturday nights, 8 o'clock on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Good afternoon. It's 39 minutes after 5 o'clock. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. I'm Nana Akua. Right, we're going to continue with our Great British debate this hour. And I'm asking, would you be prepared to join the police? Now, the Policing Minister, Kit Malthouse, has told GB News that the government are on track to recruit 20,000 new officers, despite some high-profile policing scandals recently. He says that the public still have confidence in the force. So for our Great British debate this hour, I'm asking, would you be prepared to join? Right, let's see what my panel make of that. I'm joined by Conservative advisor Claire Pearsall and also broadcaster Danny Kelly. Claire, you look like the sort of... Do you remember...
This is a worry.
Do you remember that? So what was that police show where there's just the feet were going? The Bill. And I used to watch that intently to see if their feet were ever out of time with the music, and they never were. I was like, are they mechanical feet or are they real feet? That was my big question. You look like somebody who could have been on the Bill.
Oh,
Murder Squad.
Murder Squad. I couldn't join the police. I admire people that do, but I think that it's a sort of level of detail that I'm not all over. They have to know so many different laws. They have to be right on top of everything to do with custody and looking after people and safeguarding. That's a little bit too much for me. I deal with police forces, and I actually, funnily enough, deal with Donna Jones's police force, Hampshire Constabulary, especially Test Valley Police, who are superb.
Yeah.
And the Chief Inspector there just amazes me. His knowledge of the district, his knowledge of what can be done, and what funds are available to do it. You know, he is an expert in that, and I just think, I would be rubbish. Absolutely rubbish.
But he's probably been in there for a while. I mean, if you had been in there for a while, you'd be just as good as him.
Yeah, maybe no. I think I'll stick to politics. I think is pretty.
Well, that was a TV show anyway, Claire. So you'd been good in that.
All of those,
Danny, what do you think?
all of those hazards, Claire, you can learn. They do teach you the law. I would love to have been a copper. I really would. Don't laugh. I would honestly.
All people have to do is run away from you.
I would have. Well, that's what I got a police car for, and a taser. Taser.
No, that's terrible.
No, I'm joking. I would love to have been a copper. But the thing that would have prevented me from being a copper now is the degree. And I think that is just nonsensical. And wasn't she great, the Crime Commissioner for Hampshire? What an ambassador for that role. You know, real common sense talking from that woman. I would think that you would rather have a kid who's a bit streetwise, pounding the pavements of Brixton, rather than someone who's been to university in Durham and got a degree for 2 years. And I mean that. I genuinely mean that.
But she was talking about a police degree, so I think they do some actual police degree there.
Correct. But there is also... It's always like a preclusion. So you haven't got a degree? OK, it's an obstacle. Yeah, it's an obstacle. And I think streetwise kids who know how to handle situations are better than degree kids from wherever who've been to... University of life is always better as a copper than a university, I believe.
I think so, and especially if you're street smart and you're aware of the environment. I mean, I think what would qualify you better is if, say, you lived in, I don't know, somewhere up north and that was your village and that's where you live and you knew the people and you knew the environment and that's what... I think they're missing the point because it's about community policing and getting to know your environment and your surroundings. It's like somebody is abandoned on a desert island, they've got a degree in architecture, but they don't know how to fend for themselves. It's not going to work, is it? They're going to starve.
And that's it. And I understand that you want a certain level of education, but to make people go through a degree process, I agree with you. Street smart has to be the way forward. And you're right. If you understand a community and you understand the problems and you've grown up in an area, I think that qualifies you way more than any piece of paper that says that you are educated to degree level. I don't think it's the be-all and end-all, and it's shutting out a whole bunch of people who could be really, really good.
So would you join the police, Danny? Because you said you wanted to. What about now?
At my age, well, no, because I've got a successful business away from broadcasting.
You haven't got a business.
But say I didn't have a business, I would love to. Do you know, West Midlands Police? When I was at the BBC for 18 years,
it's been 1 hour, 43 minutes, he mentioned it.
West Midlands Police did a recruitment campaign for people my age. OK, so please consider the police. And I would have done it. I'd have just loved it. I love the community. I love the risk, the danger. I love the possibility of spraying someone with pepper spray.
No,
all of these things are the great things about being a copper.
You've got
these
it
are
wrong.
the good things.
You're exactly the sort of person we don't want to be a police officer. I got some pepper spray. Yeah, I've got a taser. Honestly,
the Sweeney.
No, I think
it's not like that anymore.
Of course, it's not. And
you'll be doing a lot of paperwork.
Completely facetious. No, I'd have a secretary to do the paperwork.
No, they haven't got secretaries.
I'd hire my own.
No.
I'd be out there nicking the baddies. I would.
I can see you see yourself in the police jacket and thinking,
undercover.
Right, you're nicked.
Undercover, Nana.
Undercover.
Who would think that I was a copper?
Well, you do have a good point there, yeah.
Hey?
No, seriously, though. I mean, even now, you'd find that an attractive...
Yes, I would. Yeah, I really would, because I want to do stuff for my community as well. I really do. I think it's a vocation, being a police officer. And again, it's a preclusion. You can be a kid from the streets and not have the 2-year degree or the postgrad or whatever it is, and you could see that as a hurdle, but you could have a vocation. And that preclusion potentially could stop you fulfilling a great vocation and helping your community out.
Well, I would do it, but I'd do it because... probably for the similar reasons as you, Danny. And especially if someone wound me up as well, then I could put my blue lights on them and just say, right, get nicked.
Drag them out of a car.
Come on, get out. Go on, yeah. Again, we are probably not...
But, Nana,
that's what people see, though. But, you know, there's so much health and safety these days. You probably had to get the right gender pronouns and then you have to get... I'd just get so annoyed with it. In the end, I'd just be... Forget it, I can't be bothered.
But do you think that's why people are being put off? Because you have got all of this sort of woke nonsense going on that you must, you know, wear your rainbow badge, you must use the correct pronouns.
You must take the knee.
Absolutely, and that's not what policing is. I think everybody in their communities just wants their communities to be safe. They don't want their houses broken into, their cars broken into, cars stolen, and any antisocial behaviour looked after. They don't really care about the rainbow badges and all the rest of it. So I think the police do need to sort of row back from that, and that may be putting a lot of people off.
Well, also, I mean, you like minor crimes, there's certain crimes where they'll send loads of police cars, but when there's something quite serious, you know, nothing happens. I mean, burglaries, they don't seem to be bothered about going to... there was one place that had about 100 burglaries. Not one single one was solved. I mean, it was just, what is the point?
I think there was a study that, I can't remember the force, but they said, from that side of the street to the west of our boundary, we'll investigate burglaries. From that side of the street, same street, to the east, we won't. And then, lo and behold, after they started investigating burglaries, they managed to nick people and put people away behind bars. This is the perception that they're not bothered. They're very busy. There are 35,000 coppers in London. Where we are now, 35,000 coppers in London. So many police.
Well, interesting stuff, right. Well, this show is nothing without you and your views. Let's welcome our great British voice, your opportunity to be on the show and tell us what you really think about the topics we're discussing. Right, where should we go to this hour? Let's go to Northamptonshire. Let's speak to Carol. Carol Wright. It's been a while, Carol.
It has, Nana.
Now, Carol, weren't you once in the police or something? You've done so many different jobs. Yeah. So what do you think?
I was a police officer with Thames Valley Police for 7 years.
Yeah. Is it what attracted you then, and is it attractive now?
So I was a long time ago. It was over 20 years ago that I was a police officer. What attracted me was that I wanted to help my community, do my bit for Queen and country, keep things safe. It was so hard. It was the hardest job I've ever gone into.
Yeah. Why did you leave?
I got beaten up, knocked unconscious, had a gun pulled on me. Do I need to carry on?
Well, you survived, so no worries. Really, that's why. So from that, do you think it's an attractive profession now?
It's the most difficult profession for anyone to join. You've got to have a lot of guts, determination, and street cred. I completely agree with your speakers there. It's not about paperwork. That's what you end up doing a lot of. It's about the demanding pressure and the mental health aspect that police officers have to deal with. And you have to have that resilience to be able to deal with that type of job because it's so demanding.
Yeah, wow. Well, listen. So that is a no then? You wouldn't do it now?
Not now, no.
Wow. Right. Well, thank you, Carol. It's really good to get your insight on that. That's Carol Wright. She's there in Northamptonshire. She's our great British voice this hour. Right, well, on that bombshell, no, she didn't want to do it. I don't blame her after all of that. Now, moving on to our mini-debate. Let's see. Now, the Prime Minister wants to reduce the amount of biofuel we use, despite it being a key part of the UK's drive towards net zero, yes. He hopes it will ease the cost of living crisis by reducing the pressure on drivers to use more green fuel, things like E10 petrol that you see at the pumps. Let's see what my panel make of that. Joined now by former advisor to Conservative Party, Claire Pearsall, and also Danny Kelly. He's a broadcaster and journalist.
And a car dealer.
I know. I put the journalist.
Oh, thank you. Oh, Nana. It went over my head. I'm so sorry.
I'm doing it again.
Don't stop that. Please don't stop that from
get on with it.
doing it again. I filled up with E10 petrol today. It's £1.93 a gallon. Sorry, only £1.93 a litre. It costs £135, £140 to fill my car. Things are very expensive. I'm noticing a slight downturn in the car trade because of the price of fuel. As far as the Prime Minister asking us to move away from things that may be less good for the environment, I can tell you now, the average person on my car lot doesn't give a damn about the environment when it comes to fuel. They just want low prices. Honestly, that's a bubble. Average people don't give a damn, generally speaking, about how much toxins their car pumps out.
Yeah, Claire?
Sorry to say.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think that we have not looked closely enough at things like electric cars and the infrastructure needed for it. So I agree with you. I want my fuel to be at a low price. I know, we keep agreeing. You'll never have us back.
You two aren't coming back.
She's going to get jealous in a second.
But, I want my...
right, as in, what, jealous of that? No, come on. I'm not going to be jealous. No, I'm not, Claire. I'm all right.
But no, I want my fuel to be a low price. I think that we need to knock the green stuff on the head whilst there's a cost of living crisis. I've been quite clear about that previously, and I don't think I'll change my mind now.
Well, what I was laughing at is because, Danny, you were talking about how people don't give a damn, then you went, sorry about that. But you're not sorry at all, are you? That's right.
No, I'm not. No. It's the gritty reality of the car game, unfortunately.
Yeah.
And it's not unfortunate either.
No, not at all, unfortunately, because you're doing quite nicely out of it,
misspoken twice there, haven't I?
Yeah, I don't think people are that bothered about the fuel in their car, or although they say they're involved and concerned about the environment, at the end of the day, they look at their wallet and think, hang on a minute, if that's a lot cheaper, I'm going to do that. And I don't blame them. Right, let's move on to our quick-fire debates. We'll be looking at the role of the royals. Is it right for Prince Charles to be criticising the government's Rwanda policy or focus more on his charity work? What do you think? What should we be doing? Well, to mark the Children's Hospice Week, the Duke and Duchess of Cambridge visited East Anglia's Children's Hospice site in Milford yesterday. Now, Kate has been their patron for 10 years. Our Royal reporter Cameron Walker has more.
Son Douglas, unfortunately, was diagnosed with cancer. He actually died at home, but they sent nurses out and so on.
The impossible decision. Where does your child's life come to a close?
That's the reality for parents supported by the 54 children's hospices across the UK, who provide a lifeline for families caring for seriously ill children. The theme of this year's campaign, highlighting a service that largely relies on donations, is for the children, reminding us all, according to the Duchess of Cambridge, that children's hospices can bring joy and help families spend happy times together. Kate has been royal patron of the East Anglian Children's Hospice for 10 years and visited their site in Milton yesterday with Prince William. Chief Exec Phil Gormley thinks her warm persona makes her the perfect patron.
It means a huge amount. I mean, you can see the excitement that it brought the staff, the volunteers and the children and their parents here. And it does two things, really. It's for the last 10 years really brought to public attention the issues surrounding children's palliative care, because it's a small sector. So she's brought real profile and real human personal interest to this.
What started as a respite is now relied on by families across East Anglia. The Duke and Duchess were taken on a tour of the hospice and met young patients and their families, including Henry Wright, whose son Douglas died of cancer when he was 4 years old. Henry remembers happy moments in the sensory garden.
In the early days of the treatment, when he was feeling good and he was actually in remission, we came here and we had some really good days, particularly in sort of the play areas and things, sort of running around, and they looked after us, and you've got a day. It's not a hospital environment, it's not clinical. So we've got really good memories of here.
Just 16% of the charity's funding came from governments the year before the pandemic. This year, the charity has to raise more than £10 million in donations. Having a royal patron, staff thinks, helped secure their future. Families here make the most of their time together. Parents can be parents and not just carers. And staff believe the Duchess's decade in raising awareness means that more families understand the lifeline hospice care can provide. Cameron Walker, GB News, Cambridgeshire.
Lovely that, isn't it? Well, that little cute child, oh, bless his heart. Well, joining me is Claire Pearsall and also Danny Kelly. Do you think that they should just focus more on doing these nice sort of things rather than getting involved in Rwanda policies?
I think Prince Charles should keep his mouth shut when it comes to anything political. He definitely said it because it was leaked. If he hadn't have said it, he'd have corrected it. So I think he should keep his mouth shut because he needs to come up with an alternative as to what we're going to do with the tens and tens and tens of thousands of people risking their lives to come over here. What's the alternative, Charles?
Yes,
Bang him on an estate in Scotland or something.
Well, perhaps in one of his homes. What do you think?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think you need to look at the charity work they do. That is far more important and is exactly what the royal family should be doing. They should keep out of politics. I don't think he needs to come up with an alternative.
No.
That's not his job. That's the job of the
that's
politicians.
Right.
Yeah.
And yeah, let's raise money, especially for little boys like that we just saw. I mean, how gorgeous was he? And what a beautiful sensory playground that was.
Oh, bless him. Well, listen, on the way, Michelle is up next with Dubes & Co. Let's see what Michelle's got in store for us. Michelle.
Hello, Nana. God, what a story that was, that hospice. What great work people there do, and such sad... I find it really difficult these days to watch stories like that about children that suffer. I could sit and cry instead of telling you what's coming up, but instead I'll tell you what's coming up. The by-election, we've all seen the result there, haven't we? Apparently people are saying it's the beginning of the end of the Tories. Is it really, or is it just a bit of a mid-term blip? So we'll be looking at that. Also, apparently, we are on track to recruit the 20,000 police officers that we need in this country. A bit weird, though, because if we needed all of those police officers, why did we let them go in the first place? And is this the right solution to the crime that we face? More bobbies on the beat. What else have I got coming up? Oh, yeah, this is such a peculiar story, Nana. BT have installed what they call a pantry, a food pantry, for their staff who are struggling, perhaps, to get the food that they need. I find it very weird because... is this normalising companies paying people so poorly that they need to get their food from the office? It's all very strange.
Interesting. Well, we'll look forward to that, Michelle. Thank you so much. That's on the way. That's Dubes & Co. Now on today's show, I've been asking, can Boris Johnson keep the keys to number 10? According to our Twitter poll, 58% of you say yes, 41% of you say no. Thank you so much to my panel. Thank you so much, Claire Pearsall, and also Danny Kelly. Thank you, guys. Yeah,
Thank you.
It's a pleasure.
Thank
Good
you.
to see you. Thank
Great
you
to
very
see you too.
Right, well, I'll be back tomorrow at around about 4 o'clock. Make sure you join me. But up next, it's Michelle Dewberry and Dubes & Co.
Afternoon, Alex Deegan here with your latest weather update from the Met Office. A fresher feel arriving for all of us this weekend, with western areas quite blustery with plenty of showers, but in the east, Many places dry and bright with sunny spells. This cold front is swinging across the country tonight, introducing the cooler air, but the low is sticking around like an unwanted guest through the weekend. Tightly packed isobars suggesting some pretty gusty conditions in the west. But it's across the northeast into southeast Scotland where we've got the risk of some disruption this evening. Some thunderstorms that have been breaking out, bringing the potential for some very heavy downpours and hailstorms as well. But that cold front swings through and moves away those thundery showers and eventually introducing cooler air. It'll still be pretty warm and humid and difficult for sleeping this evening, but by dawn most of us will feel that fresher air and a cooler feel on Saturday. Still quite a bit of sunshine around, certainly for eastern parts of Scotland and eastern England. But further west, yes, there'll be some sunny spells, but also we are expecting showers over the Midlands, Wales, western parts of England and some across southwest Scotland. Could be quite wet in the west of Northern Ireland as well, but as I say, some sunny spells elsewhere. Still reasonably pleasant in the east, but it won't be as humid. Temperatures in the low 20s, whereas for many western areas we're only looking at temperatures in the mid to high teens. Feeling cooler